The last train of the evening hissed like a tired animal as it slowed at the dusty frontier station, its iron wheels screaming against the rails, and Eleanor stood frozen beneath the wooden canopy, clutching a single cloth bag that held everything she owned, her fingers numb not from the cold but from the word the conductor had just thrown at her like a stone. No. No ticket credit, no husband's name to vouch for her, no destination worth stopping for. Just another unwanted woman with tired eyes and a past the town preferred not to know. And as the train pulled away without her, steam swallowing its red lanterns, the platform seemed suddenly too large, too empty, echoing with the whispers of rejection she had heard her entire life. She had come here believing movement meant hope, believing if she could just go somewhere else she might finally belong. But instead she stood watching opportunity disappear down the tracks, her reflection faint in the metal rail, shoulders squared only by stubborn dignity, unaware that she was being watched not with judgment, but with quiet attention. From the far end of the platform, where a man in a weathered hat stood with two small girls clinging to his coat like frightened sparrows, their identical faces turned toward the stranger who looked as if she might cry but refused to. And that refusal, that strength and stillness struck Caleb heart deeper than any scream ever could. He was a rancher by necessity, a widower by fate, and a father by fierce devotion. And since the day his wife had been buried beneath a cottonwood tree, the world had narrowed to fences, meals and bedtime, stories told with a voice he wasn't sure the girls even remembered belonged to him. Yet in that moment, watching Eleanor straighten her spine and turn away from the tracks without begging or breaking, something shifted inside him, because he recognized that look, the look of someone who had learned to survive without mercy. And when his twins tightened their grip on his coat, sensing his stillness, he looked down at them and saw the same hunger he felt every night in the quiet ranch house. Not for food, not for money, but for warmth, guidance, and a presence that could soften the hard edges of a life lived too fast and too alone. And as Eleanor moved toward the bench at the far end of the station, planning to sleep sitting upright like she had done too many times before, Caleb took one slow step forward, then another, the wood creaking beneath his boots, the past arguing with him, fear warning him, but instinct, rare and insistent, pulling him closer, until he stopped just behind her, cleared his throat and said nothing yet, because even he didn't know how a single sentence could change 4 lives forever. Eleanor did not turn when she heard footsteps behind her, because disappointment had taught her not to hope, and hope had taught her not to look back. Yet when the man spoke, his voice low and steady like wind through tall grass, it carried something she hadn't heard in years, respect. And when he said her name, not because he knew it, but because he asked it first, she answered before she could stop herself. And when she finally faced him, she saw not pity but purpose in his eyes, saw the way the twins pressed into his sides as if he were the last solid thing in a shifting world, and she braced herself for charity, for a proposition that would wound her pride. But instead he surprised her by telling the truth, simple and unpolished, that he was not looking to rescue anyone, that his ranch was running, his daughters were fed, and his life was steady, but something essential was missing, something no hired hand or neighbor could replace. And as the sun dipped low enough to set the platform ablaze in gold, he leaned closer, not to claim her, not to command her, but to confide. His words meant only for her ears. "My twins need a mother like you." And the sentence did not land like a promise, but like a question she had never been allowed to answer, because no one had ever suggested she was what someone else needed. And the girls looked up at her then, not with fear, but with curiosity, one offering a shy half-smile, the other watching with eyes too old for her years. And Eleanor felt something inside her chest ache open, memories flooding back of lullabies once sung, hands once held, a version of herself she thought had been lost forever. Yet she did not say yes, not immediately, because survival had taught her to measure every step, to question every kindness. And so she asked what he expected of her, what he was offering, what he was risking, and Caleb answered without hesitation, telling her he could offer a place, not ownership, work, not obligation, and time, not demands, and that if she chose to walk away in the morning, he would drive her to the next town himself with no debt between them. And that honesty, raw and unguarded, did what charm never could, because it treated her not as a solution but as a choice. And when the station lights flickered on and the platform cooled, Eleanor realized she was no longer thinking about where the trains went. only about whether she dared to stay. And as the girls reached for her hands, one on each side, the decision she had feared making her entire life suddenly felt less like surrender and more like stepping into a future that might finally choose her back. The ranch was not grand, and the house creaked with age and memory. But when Eleanor crossed its threshold the next morning, dust swirling in sunlit beams and the twins racing ahead to show her rooms that smelled faintly of soap and cedar, she understood that belonging was not about perfection, but presence. And over the weeks that followed, she learned the rhythm of their lives, the way Caleb rose before dawn to tend the land, the way the girls argued over buttons and stories, the way silence sometimes settled, heavy at the dinner table when grief brushed too close, but instead of filling that silence with apologies, Eleanor filled it with consistency, with meals cooked slowly, with hands that brushed hair from frightened faces, with laughter that surprised them all when it escaped her without permission, and the ranch responded as living things often do to care, growing warmer, softer, less haunted, and Caleb watched it happen, not as a man falling in love, but as a father, witnessing his children bloom again. They watched her approach with smiles that came from long practice. In the way they slept through the night, in the way they spoke Eleanor's name not as a title but as a truth. And Eleanor, who had spent her life proving she could endure loneliness, discovered that staying was far braver than leaving, that letting herself be needed did not erase her strength but gave it meaning. And when the day came that the same train passed through town again, its whistle echoing across the fields, she stood on the porch with the twins on either side and Caleb beside her, and none of them moved toward the tracks, because some departures were necessary to find yourself, but some arrivals were worth everything you had lost. And as Eleanor reached for Caleb's hand, not as a promise spoken, but as one lived, the story completed its quiet arc, not with fireworks or vows, but with the simple truth that family is sometimes born not of blood or plans, but of one moment when someone sees you clearly and whispers that you are exactly what this broken world has been waiting for.